So I'm commenting on Austen while also giving her a big hug and hopefully then giving somebody a new way in without it just being, as the Princess Bride says, is this a kissing book?
Welcome to Genuine Chit-Chat. I am speaking with an author who is adapting the Jane Austen novels. I say adapting, he's already done 2 of them. The third one is already in the works. It's going to be published later this year, and I have read them so far, and they are fantastic. I had no necessary interest in Jane Austen prior, but these novels have really excited me a lot. So I'm speaking with Mr. A.R. Farina in this podcast.
Hello.
So, yes, hello there, good sir. It's
hello,
a pleasure.
Good sir.
It's a pleasure.
Hello.
Speaking like Jane Austen. It's a pleasure. So we'll kick things off. I mean, you're a very good friend of mine, Tony.
I am.
A.R. Farina, but Tony to me.
Yes.
And so,
do we know why? Do you know why it's A.R. Farina and not Tony? Have I told you this story?
It's because of a certain author that you really like, isn't it? Who does it in a certain styling.
Well, J.D. Salinger is initials, C.S. Lewis. So as a kid, the people I read, but also, and this is true, if you go to your Googler or to your internet search buddy of choice and type in Tony Farina, there's a big band singer from New York called Tony Farina, and you'll end up on Tony Farina Entertainment, and he's like got a great mustache and he like sings big band songs. So I didn't want people to think I was him.
I see. Well, A.R. Farina, Tony Farina, it's all good. But people behind me can see that the love 2 of the work, well, these 2 books specifically, A.R. Farina, and then this, Comics Lit, a collection of essays comparing, we're talking about comic books and classic literature and stuff, and there's going to be more volumes of that coming out in the future as well. And I'm hoping one day to be a contributor.
You will be in one of those.
Hopefully.
Absolutely.
If my writing is up to scratch.
That's
up
the
to thing.
Scratch.
Maybe.
You are accepted. I'm the editor, and I know the other editor very well.
Maybe. Only if the writing's good enough. Maybe.
I promise.
But yeah, so Jane Austen. So the big question is why adapt Jane Austen, and why is your adaptation important? Why should someone pick up your adaptation of Jane Austen? How is it different? I know these answers, but you're the gentleman who wrote them. So why don't you tell us a bit about them?
Sure. So why Jane Austen? So the thing about Jane Austen is, and I will admit to being sucked into the wrong-headedness of it. People can love what you love. I'm never going to tell anybody not to love what they love. But as a kid, I was under the impression that there were 3 really good Jane Austen books and 3 boring Jane Austen books. And the 3 good ones, everybody said, were Pride and Prejudice, Sense Sensibility, and Emma. And those are the ones that people read. Those are the ones that have been the most adapted. Those are the ones that lean heavy into the romance. And the movie versions, the TV versions, the adaptations of those have always been very straight white girl loving straight white guy, and it's very kissy face. It's very, this is a kissing book. And so that is what everybody thinks. And so then it was later in life, I came to read Mansfield Park, Persuasion, and Northanger Abbey. And just as you age, you understand there's a lot more going on in Austen than it's not just a kissing book, because they end at weddings. Only Sense and Sensibility shows a wedding, and not really. You see Eleanor get married because you have, spoiler alert, for a couple 100-year-old book, but then you find out that you wait for Marianne to get married, and so because there's sisters, so there's the 2 heroines in that one. So that's the only one where you actually see the wedding, but they all end at the wedding, because so the commentary isn't, she doesn't write sequels. She wasn't like 10 years later and Lizzie and Darcy hate each other. That's not what happens. It's like you get to leave thinking they're going to love each other forever. It's going to be awesome. Everything is awesome. So, and that's true. All of that is there. But what I find as I've grown up and as I've become a literature professor, and a creative writer and all these things, that Jane is really funny, that she's actually a social satirist. And so for me, why Jane Austen is that, and why I adapt Jane Austen, is because people sometimes miss the point, and the language is dense. It is. I'm not pretending it isn't. She wrote hundreds of years ago in English, but in a different version of English. You, my friend, are notoriously not a Shakespeare fan.
I struggle with Shakespeare, and I listened to, when I got an Audible subscription, I listened to the audio dramas of Jane Austen. They've got the complete works. Yeah. I listened to Sense and Sensibility, I think. I enjoyed it. It's got like Emma Thompson and like Billie Piper and loads of other great people who narrate it, and it's cool. But there are points where people are having conversations, and I'm like, I get the gist. I think what's happening, but I had to keep
Right.
rewinding it occasionally. I was like, it took me a while to click on to like what was being said, which
Correct.
did put me off. And she's only like a halfway point between modern day and Shakespeare. So go back to Shakespeare, and I'm like, yeah, I've seen Shakespeare in plays, and a lot of it, I'm like, by context, I generally see what's going
happening.
on.
Yeah, but you don't know if it's funny or not. You know, like where I love it and I laugh heartily at it, and I understand that some of the words that Shakespeare uses are actually no longer being used. You know. But you are correct. That is well said. She's sort of the middle point there. So it's in English, but it is in a different version, Edwardian English. And so that is also a barrier, right? And it is of its time and place. And so there's a lot of first cousins getting married. And that doesn't sell, right? There's not a lot. I mean, maybe depending on what you're into. I'm not here to...
I think Game of Thrones is probably the only show where first cousins getting married, and The Crown, I guess, are like the only shows that can kind of get away with it. But modern day stuff, not so much.
It's not great. Not so great. So those things get in the way of it. And again, the version of what you think it is. And the reason I make that argument is The Princess Bride is not Jane Austen. The Princess Bride, the movie and the book of Princess Bride, the story is there's this guy called S. Morgenstern who wrote a book called The Princess Bride, and that the main character in the movie is Fred Savage. But in the book, it's William Goldman himself. He's written himself into it. When he was sick, his grandpa would always read him The Princess Bride. And he was like, this is the best book to read when you're sick. And so William Goldman, in the book, is out on a movie shoot and his son is sick. So he sends him a copy of The Princess Bride thinking, this is going to cheer him up. And his son hates it. And then when he gets home and he's like, well, how'd you like The Princess Bride? He's like, Dad, it was awful. And then he picks it up and realizes his grandpa was editing it. He was only reading the good parts. So the book version of The Princess Bride is written by William Goldman, pretending that he's edited the S. Morgenstern book, which does not actually exist, but it's only the good parts.
Right.
So he does this hat on a hat thing. And that is what all of the adaptations of Jane Austen are. It's always like, let's get to the good parts. And everybody thinks the good parts is the romance. But the good parts isn't just the romance. The good parts is the biting satire, is the commentary on the patriarchy, on the way women were treated, the way that women are to each other, the way that fathers and daughters are, and mothers and daughters are, and the relationships between sisters. And all of that is on full display, which is what makes it fantastic. But it's always missing because you're trying to fight through the language and you're trying to fight through, this, like all of those other icky things. So for me, I can see, I'm like, look, I get it. If Jane Austen were writing it today, Mansfield Park, the reward for Fanny, number one, she wouldn't be called Fanny. Because
you very cleverly changed her name.
Yes, depending on what country you're in, yours or mine, Fanny means something different, but either way, you don't want to name a 17-year-old girl Fanny.
I don't think you want to name anyone or anything Fanny anymore.
Correct. And so that's a problem. Number one, that's a problem. Everybody's named after themselves. And she uses the same names over and over, which is also part of the biting satire. There's even a line...
What do I think about that?
Yeah,
I literally say to you, like, did you actually, like, I feel like when I read the first book, Welcome to Mansfield, then I read Other Dashwood Girl, I was like, wait, Marianne and Maria. I was like, phonetically they sound quite different, but written down, I'm like, they're not the same character. And it's a shared universe anyway, and it's like,
Yeah. Well, and the punchline is in Welcome to Mansfield. So in Mansfield Park, this is also part of the problem, is all the parents name their kids after themselves. So in Mansfield Park, there's William Price and William Price Jr., and there's Francis Price and Francis Price Jr., and then there's Thomas Bertram and Thomas Bertram Jr., and Mariah Bertram and Mariah Bertram Jr. But in England, Mariah, without the H, you guys say Mariah, but we would say Maria here. So in the original version of Welcome to Mansfield, I actually named the mom Mariah and the daughter, or the Maria and the daughter Mariah with an H. I put the H on there to make sure. And then when I got halfway through, I was like, and plus there's still a Mary in there. And then there's President Bennett, who's also Mary. So it's like, so that's why her name becomes Candy, just as a nickname, but you learn early on that her name is actually that. So there's this whole thing about the namification of like, you think you're so important that you want to name your children after yourself. No pressure on your children either. And that is also the big commentary from Jane. It's like, so there's even a joke in Persuasion about all the Janes and Elizabeths. that are named after that. Like she just like calls it right out. That this is just what happens. They all just keep naming each other the same things over and over. So all of that is a problem in a way to, those are all, I would not call them walls. They're doors. They're hurdles. You can get through them. It's not like you're falling off the edge of a cliff here. But for a lot of people, that's enough. You're like, screw that. I've got through this far. I don't want to read it. That's boring, whatever. So my thought is, what if I can get to the heart of the story, tell as a person who likes to do literary criticism and who is taught literary criticism, what if I turned fiction into literary criticism? So I'm commenting on Austen while also giving her a big hug and hopefully then giving somebody a new way in without it just being, as the Princess Bride says, is this a kissing book? That is the least important part of it to me. The love matters, like Jane loves to love, and there's so much love in all of her books. So in all of mine, I wanted there to be a focus on those things. But I also wanted to pay homage to her. So in every book, there's a clergy. Somebody is either studying religion or is a member of clergy, and somebody serves in the military, because those are what her brothers did. And so her father was a clergyman, her brother was a clergyman, and your brothers were soldiers. So those are important things to her. Music is a big deal in Jane Austen's books. There's always music.
Playlists. You've got whole on your website.
I do.
You make playlists of them to listen to, and all the characters have got intricate connections to modern music or pseudo-modern, depending on who they are, what time, like, relationship with their parents, because, the junior...
You like what your parents like. It's true.
To a degree. Yeah, it depends on who you are.
Well, it depends on who you are, but the first music you listen to as a kid is the music your parents listen
heavily
to.
Influences you. Yeah.
And so you decide, do I still like those or not? My mother said to me one time, I don't understand the Ramones. And I said, yeah, they're not for you. Right? That's not for her. Like, I came to the Ramones without them, but like, I love the Beach Boys still. I like the Beatles still. I got to them because of my parents, right? The mamas and the papas, that kind of thing. But I got to the Ramones on my own. And my kids, Emma and Rachel, because, Lee and I blended. So my birth children, not my stepchildren, they saw Rock and Roll High School more times than was probably appropriate for children of that age. But they knew which Ramones were which. Like, they could look at them and go, that's Marky, that's Johnny, that's Joey, that's Dee Dee. That was important to me. Now, I don't know if they still listen to the Ramones, but I do know that they know who they are still. I do know that they both listen to enough punky music, but I've also learned about music from them. So your musical taste does grow. But I do know plenty of people who, like Junior, didn't evolve. But there's also something else happening there, as the fraught relationship Junior has with her dad. She's also very desperate to get along with him. And so while she does love that music and that's genuine, there is also that's the fun thing about books, right? It's like every time you read it again, you and I were just talking about, you want to go back and watch something again. Okay, but you've seen it, but you want to watch it again, not so that you can watch it and have it on in the background. And I know some people do that. I know Rhea will do that. She'll like watch Buffy in the background and do something else.
I can't do that.
Right. And I totally get that some people can. My kids can do it. Lots of people do it. I don't. Lee's like us. We're like, if it's on, I would like to watch it. Mm-hmm. And I'm here for it. I want to see something new and interesting the second time. Now,
recontextualize it almost.
Right. There is something comforting about like watching this. Like, I've seen Heathers more than any other movie. And every time I could act it out, but when I watch it, I watch it. Mm. I'm looking for something different. This older version of me, different than the 16-year-old version of me who saw it, or the 18-year-old version of me. And I watch that movie 2 or 3 times a year. I love it. I mean, it is so important to me. And I know it couldn't be made today for all of the problems it has, but I also love the boldness of that. And so every time I reread Jane, every time I reread these books, as I'm getting ready to write them, I'm trying to see it with the newest eyes, find what I think are the problems that I think an audience who's never picked up a Jane Austen book might run into, and work my way through that. That's why my narrator talks to you but Jane Austen talks to the audience all the time. At the end of Pride and Prejudice, she switches to first person, and she does it in Northanger Abbey too. She just breaks the fourth wall and just starts talking directly to the reader, which is amazing. And you know how many times I've read those books and didn't catch it because you're so caught up in the whatever, you miss it. But when you're doing that, so that is why Jane Austen, I want people to recontextualize it, give it a chance. She sold very well. It's not like people are like, who's this young scrappy
She's on our
startup?
money, isn't she? You know, I think
she is on your money.
I think I gave you
me some. You did.
Yeah, I gave you a
£10
note, and so it's like her face is on our money. So
yeah, she's kind of a big deal.
If you didn't know,
if you didn't know, she's kind of a big deal. I have a Jane Austen action figure up there. I've got this here. Did you give me this one?
Is it the mini book? Oh no,
the finger puppet.
No, I didn't.
Okay, I've got this Jane Austen finger puppet. No, the mini book is on Lee's desk.
Huh.
And then up there, I've got another action figure that I got. So she's a big deal, but I still think, just like with Shakespeare, just like with any classic, whether it's J.D. Salinger or whether it's Hemingway or whether it's whatever becomes a classic, even C.S. Lewis, as a kid, I read those and didn't realize they were Christian allegories because I was 5 when I read them the first time. So I didn't know. I was like, they're cool. Reaper Cheap's awesome. That's all you know. And then when you read them as you're older, you grow up with them. So that's it. And I just think she's funny. And I've said this before, and this is a line I'm happy to use over and over again. If Jane Austen were alive today, she would be the host of The Daily Show. That is what she does. So The Daily Show, I don't know if you get that over there, but in America...
We know what it is because John Oliver hosts it now. Is that right? Or is it Trevor
No, Jon Stewart's back. John Oliver did host it for a while, and he started his own last week tonight.
Okay, yeah, of course, because the over COVID time, all the hosts were flicking around and changing.
Yeah,
There's like 5 or 6 American TV shows that are hosted, and 2 of them are Jimmy's, and then and it's like I know about them, but
So you get it with what John Oliver does. So what the Daily Show is it's a fake news program that is satire that's commenting on not just the news, but on the media's coverage of the news, and that's why I think Jane Austen would host that, because she is always commenting on what's happening. And at the time, what was the news for her is who was getting married, who wasn't getting married, who was being an asshole, whose dad was mean, whose mom was sort of a bitch, whose sister was talking out of the side of her mouth, whose brother was a cad. All of that was the news of the day, right? So she was then commenting on the gossip. That was the best thing. She was gossiping with her novels, but she's really commenting. There's always a gossip. Every book has somebody who's a blabbermouth, who's a tattletale, who wants to know everything that want to be in everybody else's business and wants to definitely live inside a glass house and throw stones. So the world is still like that. Mm-hmm. We have not evolved except our language has. So for me, Jane Austen is that. She is the reason she is a classic, the reason some classics endure, your favorite piece of media, Star Wars, the reason it is a classic and the reason it endures is because it has something to say. It has something to say in a different way than Star Trek has something to say, but Star Wars, to pretend, when people get all pissy and they're like, Star Wars is woke. Like, dude... Pay attention. It was
Listen to George Lucas for any interview. You ask him, and he says it's literally about the Vietnam War. Okay, but that means the Empire will be America. Yes, that's literally what he's saying.
Shocking, I know.
That's the whole point.
And in Rogue One, he really leaned into that. He's like, and I know he didn't do Rogue One, but in Rogue One, they were like acknowledging, hey.
Wait till you see season 2 of Andor, Jesus.
No
spoilers, but Jesus.
I cannot wait. But that's what I'm saying is like, so this. All art is political, and as Spider Dan always says, and the classics endure not because you're being told they're classics, but because they're actually good. There's something that everybody can relate to, and so Shakespeare endures not because of the language. We don't use that language, but because there's something that he's commenting on in those things. Even his histories, which of course are not the real history, but he's commenting on something. Jane Austen does it. Star Wars does it. Star Trek does it. The reason these things don't die is that the reason that people keep trying desperately to bring back the Twilight Zone is because there's something important to be said there, right? So that's why punk and rock and rap continue to live, but polka doesn't. Like there's still polka.
Why is dubstep gone? But other stuff continues. Yeah,
exactly, because it has something to say, and so I think. But I want people to get to Jane Austen and to get to it in a different way. So the reason I chose to adapt it, particularly Welcome to Mansfield, was I was doing my MFA and I did a character study. and we were supposed to pick two characters, like different deep dive character sketches. And so I did one on Barbara Gordon, and which was fascinating to write a 20-page paper on Batgirl.
Only 20 pages. I was good.
Yeah.
Her journey is. Where would you choose in her journey? You know what I mean?
Correct. Like, I went all the way back to. I focused on Barbara Gordon, not the Batgirl character, because Batgirl. There's a different version of Batgirl in the original run. So I focused on the Barbara Gordon, librarian with the photographic memory version of Barbara Gordon, and that was kind of the focus.
Pre-killing joke, I assume, or pre-being
Yes.
paralyzed? Yeah.
Correct.
I was going to say, that's why I'm thinking, she's got so many different parts to her, which you could almost write an entire book of essays about different eras of Barbara Gordon.
You could. Yeah. But I did that, but through it all, through all the killing joke of it, everything, she's still this brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
She's almost got synesthesia the way that her mind works. And I found that to be, so I did that deep study. And then the other person I picked was Fanny Price, because she's so overlooked as a character. And she's the only Austen character that we meet as a little girl and watch her grow up. So I had this whole book, and I think Mansfield Park is misunderstood. So I did this deep dive into her and spending all this time with her and really writing almost a defense of Fanny Price, so I don't have to defend Jane Austen. She's Jane Austen. But then when I was done with my MFA novel, and it was, what are you going to do next? Because that didn't get published. And if you want to take it seriously, and there's lots of people, and I'm not here to shame, there's lots of people who get their MFAs and that's it. They only write what they do for their MFA. They quit writing. They do it to write that thing for a teaching job or to just say I have it. I got my MFA because I didn't know how to write a novel. I wrote short stories, I'd written plays, I'd written songs. I couldn't crack how to write a novel, and I wanted to learn. So I took it very seriously. Then once I figured it out, I was like, I can't stop now. So Lee and I talked about it, and I was like, well, what would be fun? I could do this, I could do this. I said, but I have this idea of giving Fanny Price her due, really doing like a retelling of Mansfield Park, getting rid of the first cousin thing. In America, we have sororities. And I don't know that you guys do that there.
We don't really, but we know about them. There's a degree of it a little bit in uni life, but nowhere even close at all.
So in America, we have sororities and fraternities. You call yourselves brothers or sisters. So I was like, well, what if instead of them being actual sisters like they are in Mansfield Park, the three matriarchs of there, they were sorority sisters. And so that's where Frances Price Sr. and Candy, Bertram, and Norris, they become sorority sisters instead of actual sisters. I know, in there. And so then as I just started, I was like, so what are the things? So I wanted to make sure I stayed stuck true to this character that I spent all this time, because Fanny Price is this good. She's good. Her heart is good. She's pure. She sticks to her guns. And I thought, well, it's peer pressure is hard. It's hard to be a person in the world. And your wife is a school teacher. Every day she goes to work and sees people be mean to each other.
Yeah.
And, it's hard. And the kid who sticks to their guns is the outcast, is the pariah, the one who doesn't go along to get along. And Fanny Price was that. So I was like, well, what would that look like? Maybe the good kids need a hero too. So I just started doing it for myself to try to give Fanny Price to comment on Mansfield Park, but also to give her. So first I changed her name to Junior to get rid of the whole Fanny of it. And then that was it. And so I put all the other characters in as just for me, just for funsies, adding the other characters from the other books. And then when I sold it as a series, I was like, oh, well, they're there. So now I can keep going. So
and you could do the shared universe thing. Well, I want to ask, because what I want to delve into a bit is with Junior in Welcome to Mansfield. She's still a central character in Mansfield Park, but there's a lot less to her. But I want to talk about now the latest published book, which is behind you, which is That Other Dashwood Girl. So I'd say, Pride and Prejudice is the most famous Jane Austen story. I don't know which would be if between Emma and Sense and Sensibility. I think maybe Sense Sensibility, but they're probably quite close. And so most people know the two Dashwoods, I think, in Sense Sensibility. In fact, I listened to that audiobook thing I mentioned, and I genuinely had no idea there was a third Dashwood sister. I remember we spoke about it, and you're like, oh yeah, the third, Maggie Dashwood or Margaret. And I was like, who? And I looked it up, and and there's like one picture of her from like a movie adaptation. And like her bio on like Jane Austen Wikipedia is like a paragraph, and it's like
Right.
there's very little to her. So I want to ask that you've given us a great explanation onto, you know, your adaptation of Mansfield Park, Welcome to Mansfield, right behind me, and that's the first book of 6. So the second
Yes.
book, so this is quite a big task, because, you know, where Mansfield Park in a lot of respects is one of the most underrated Austen books, you almost had, to a degree, more freedom. But when it comes to Sense and Sensibility, one would expect it to be this massive big upheaval, because it is the second or third biggest Jane Austen novel, and Sense and Sensibility in modern times is still among some of the biggest novels of all time. You know, even if someone hasn't read it, if you said Sense and Sensibility, most people would go, oh yeah, Jane Austen. Have you read it? Probably half or a degree of them would know the story.
I saw the Emma Thompson movie.
Well, that's it. Yeah, probably. But like, everyone, I think, it's a household name for a book.
Yeah.
So, but you wrote the central character is a character who's barely in it, but is actually quite a important character in a lot of respects. So I want to ask, like, how did you adapt a character? How do you put a character in it? And how do you, in some ways, not quite rewrite the story, but change the perspective of Sense and Sensibility so it still makes sense, and it is still, you know, it still connects with the actual original story, so it is faithful to that. But how do you do it about a character who's barely in it? What did you do specifically about the Other Dashwood Girl? Because I thought I loved Welcome to Mansfield, and then I read the Other Dashwood Girl, and I was like, no, this is my new favorite. I absolutely adore it, and I literally at points I was just reading it, and then I'd have to go to bed, and I was doing that thing which, you know, it's a good book when you're looking at the time and you're like, okay, if I go to bed now, I'll get 5 hours, or I'll get like 6 hours sleep in 15 minutes. If I read one more chapter, hopefully it only take me 5 minutes, and then by the time I get to bed and stuff, I'll still get 6 hours sleep. And I was like doing the calculations of how little sleep I could survive on, so I could read more of Other Dashwood Girl, and I bought a copy for my nephew who I think would really enjoy it, and I'm going to be spreading the word. So with Sense and Sensibility, how did you reframe it, recontextualize it, and focus on a character who's barely in it? Please tell us how you did that on such a big book.
Thank you for all of those kind words. So Maggie's my favorite too so far. So I've written 4 of them, and Maggie is my favorite by far so far. I don't know. It's going to be hard to top her because I get upset every time I'm done writing them. But I love her, love her. So a couple of things. When I wrote Mansfield, I always thought it was funny that Junior Fanny Price is a background character in her own novel. So the other characters that I added were sort of considered background characters in other novels. So Mary Bennet is a background character in Pride and Prejudice, and Maggie Dashwood is a background character in Sense Sensibility. And so meeting her in Dashwood Girl, and then having her be a gift winner, and having her, so I got to know her a little bit by just getting her to hang out with Junior. Mm-hmm. So there's a scene in Dashwood or in Mansfield when they're in Junior's room and they start talking about Rocky movies, and that moment was really a huge deal for me. Like her like weird encyclopedic knowledge of the Rocky franchise was just a one-off fun thing to do. And then Julia's like, oh, I rewatched them all before.
And just to clarify for other people as well, you're obviously shared universe and things, but that Other Dashwood Girl takes place chronologically before Welcome to Mansfield. So Welcome to Mansfield is actually a pseudo sequel in a way to the Other Dashwood Girl, because Maggie Dashwood appears as an 18-year-old, as opposed as a 19-year-old. So we knew her when reading. If you read them in the order, in air quotes, of them coming out, you kind of knew. Oh, this is fully formed Maggie Dashwood. Yeah. How does she become? How does she go from the unknown Dashwood sister to her own fully formed person, helping this younger character find themselves? Which I loved that. Sorry, I just want to interject there because not everyone's read your book, so I wish they had.
No,
but
thank you. But that is exactly what I did. That's exactly right. So, because I had glimpses of her and the other characters, there's glimpses of them in the first book. By me doing that, I have a sense of them. Not a fully formed version of them, but I have a sense of them. So that was that. And I was like, this is interesting. She wears a tie. She's openly bisexual. She likes weird action movies. Like most things you wouldn't expect, like a 19-year-old queer British girl to be into action movies. So I was like, what is that about? And so just like those were things that existed. She likes art. Like I had like basic things about her. So when I sat down to write her book, I reread Sense Sensibility and I looked for her in there. I did watch a couple of adaptations. Now, there are some adaptations that she's not even in.
Yeah.
That they've just written her out completely, or like she's not even in the screen adaptation, which is bananas. And oddly enough, one of my favorite versions of Maggie Dashwood is Sense and Sensibility and Sea Monsters, which is the sequel to Pride and Prejudice and Zombies.
Oh, yeah. And the same person who wrote Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. That kind of universe in a sense.
Yes. So he didn't write Sense and Sensibility and Sea Monsters, but it's Quirk books.
Okay.
He wrote Pride and Prejudice, Zombies, and Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, which I love. That book is spectacular. So Seth Grahame-Smith is his name. But in the Sense and Sensibility and Sea Monsters, that was the only book that I ever saw anybody who's like, Maggie Dashwood's just sort of running around. And everybody forgets about her. What's up with that? And in that version, she accidentally brings forth a sea god, like a demon. She calls forth a demon because nobody's paying attention to her. So I was like, I love that somebody else sees her the way I do, as this sort of forgotten kid, who's forgotten about. So I had enough. I realized there was only one other writer that I'd ever seen who was like, when a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old is left to her own devices, what is she going to do? Well, she's going to run around. She's going to get in trouble probably, or she's going to be lonely, or she's going to be looking for friends. So I knew I dislike Marianne Dashwood, like the original Marianne Dashwood. I am not a fan of her. She is. And I know you dislike my version of Marianne Dashwood quite a bit.
She's my second most hated character in the Austen Chronicles so far,
besides
after Norris. But I think I might hate her more than Norris.
Wow.
I feel like Norris is the kind of character where I hate 100% of you, so you're irredeemable to me.
Yeah.
But Marianne kind of knows she's being a see you next
awful.
Tuesday, and she knows it. She half recognizes it, but still does it anyway. And I'm like, there's people that you meet in your life who suck and they don't realize it. And then there's people who you meet in your life who suck and they completely are aware of it, but they think they're better than everyone so they can get away with it. And those people make me want to scream. And your version, just talking about it is making me angry, because in that book, she does some stuff and I'm like, don't you dare say that to Maggie. How dare you? Who are you?
Right. Who are you?
You're a very good writer, because the characters you've written and constructed make me feel so many emotions.
That's good. That makes me very happy. That makes me pleased. I mean, not that you were mad at her, but I feel that way every time I read it. I'm like, God, she's awful. Why does everybody give her such pass? And she's such a drama queen in the book. So I was like, well, let's make her a real drama queen. So I make her be an actor. And so it's just one of those situations where I had a sense of who she was, and I just put myself in her place. You've got this older passive sister, you've got this drama queen sister, and then when your dad dies, it happens to you too. But what if nobody lets that happen to you? Now, you and I both, different ages, but we both have lost our dads, and we have siblings, and our siblings handled it differently than we handled it for all the reasons that happened. And so I just think there's something to, and that's obviously, you're always writing about yourself and everything that you do. And so, Lee always said to me that when my dad died, it was sort of like, she watched me let it happen to everybody else. I almost didn't let it happen to me. And that was a choice I made, but it was still a choice I made. So, but what if it wasn't your choice to let it happen to somebody else? What if nobody let it happen to you? So putting her in this heartbreaking place where nobody acknowledged her, everybody thought she was fine because she's so self-sufficient, because she doesn't really call a sea demon. She's just sort of alone. She's just up in the treehouse. She's painting, and she doesn't cause any trouble. And when you are a kid who doesn't cause any trouble, you are very, very easily overlooked, especially in times of tragedy. So starting her off on tragedy and making the choice to have the tragedy happen the moment that, right at the second of her birthday happening, was also so now you're inextricably linked to this horrible thing that nobody's allowing you to feel. So once I kind of broke her heart right away on her 13th birthday, that allowed me to, now I'm meeting her on her 13th birthday. I already know what she's like when she's 19. So I got 6 years to get her there. How can this girl, this woman, this 19-year-old woman who's happily an out bisexual woman, talking about Rocky movies and doing all this stuff and says, you've got double D brains, and has all this wisdom, which was Tanya's favorite line from Welcome to Mansfield, by the way. She was when Miss Maggie says that to Junior, you've got double D brains. How could I get her to be that person? So I then just had to live with her, and I had to like figure out what that would be like. She needed to be isolated. She needed to go through stuff. She needed to come out. I didn't know that she didn't know that she was queer right away. I let that happen. I talked to Ada about it, and Ada was like, I was like, tell me your coming out story. And Ada's just like, I thought everybody was bisexual. I just always was. I didn't know that you weren't. I didn't know that other people weren't. I just thought everybody was. So like, well, that's no fun. I can't steal that story for my book. Now I got to think it up on my own. Thanks.
The coming out story, I've got a note here, which is it's one of my favorite, not only parts in your books, it's one of my favorite parts of any book I've ever read or any piece of content I've ever read, because I think I don't necessarily want to spoil it here because I really want people to consume it. And it's one of the reasons I purchased it for my nephew, but it's like, it's done in a way that is so individual, but so it's like got a mental element to it, but it's got an emotional side to it. And it's not like you come out to your family and they hate you for it, because like we've got enough stories of that happening. And
we didn't need that.
And I didn't think you would do that, but I'm like, I'm glad you didn't anyway. But it's like, it's still an important part to them. But again, she's so overlooked. There's a point where she kind of comes out and people don't really, they're like, one character says, oh, I don't care. But they don't mean it in, I don't care about you. They're like, you are so not a problem to me. I'm not fussed. And it's like, how does someone who gets overlooked have a coming out story? Do they want people to make a fuss? Do they not? And it's like, in the modern day, I think they're so important because Megan and I have spoken about, when we eventually have kids and things, if our kid we don't want our kid to come out in air quotes. We just want them to know our house is open to whatever sexuality you end up being. But if they want to come out and for it to be and they say to us, Mum, Dad, I'm queer or whatever, we will be like, oh, that's amazing. We still love you anyway. We wouldn't be like, oh, we don't care. We would, what I mean? So it is the way you did it is so brilliant. And I did wonder if you'd spoken to people, because we have a lot of friends who are queer, and I'm like, it really, you can tell in your writing that it wasn't just like, I'm a straight white dude writing about coming out. It's like you actually took time to think about it and talk to people.
I did. And I talked, and that was actually, it's funny that you say it that way, because Ada, who is of course the narrator of the Austen Chronicles, didn't have a coming out story, just was. That was Ada's life. So it sounds like that's the way it would be for you. It's like, if your kid's like, what wants to kiss a boy and kiss a girl, you're like, yep, whatever. Cool, you do you. And that's what it was kind of. So when I didn't have that, it's like, and I had spoken to other people. I had lots of queer friends. In college, and I am an ally. I was in the Gay Straight Alliance when I was in undergrad. In my version of Mansfield, Albion College, and it's just like one of those things. You just have friends. I remember, I had the rainbow flag on the back of my car. Early 90s, and I'm working on a construction site, and one of the guys like, oh, I got all these bumper stickers on my car, and he's like, one said "Kill Your Television," which is the name of a song from Ned's Atomic Dustbin, one of my favorite Manchesterian bands, and that nobody's ever heard of. But so, and then there was the rainbow flag, and the guy was like, what's that? And he's like, asked me, like, we're just on a break, and I told him, and I was like, oh, that's a gay pride flag. The word ally didn't exist at the time, in that way. I mean, the word ally existed, but you didn't say that of yourself at the time. I'm like, oh, and I support that. And the guy just said, he's like, I don't think I would put that on my van. I was like, oh, I know. I understand that you wouldn't, but I would. Like that, I don't care if you see the rainbow flag on the back of my car. I don't care what you think that says about me. That's me saying what I say about the people I care about. And so I needed that. I think that's important. So just like being around, queer people growing up and having plenty of queer relatives, and it's just what it is. And it was never a big deal. I just didn't want it to be a big deal. It shouldn't be a big deal. And like you said, there's plenty of stories about the kid who gets pushed out of their family and that's really just a heartbreaker. And Maggie's life is already so hard. That didn't need to be the thing, but she did need to go through it alone, she thought. So like you said, so Juliet is a character that we meet who's not in the original book. And I keep doing that every time. I keep adding characters who aren't in the original books, which is fun. It also makes me nervous a little. They're like, like she doesn't exist. But I needed there to be, like you said, she needs a Yoda, as it were. And so that character sort of just came in whole cloth.
I think you'd say that character came out. I was like, good
she
pun.
just came out of the ether to me. No, so it was just, she's great. And I didn't know how great she would be. But then once I invented her, I was like, well, shit, she's got to be gone because Maggie doesn't mention her in Welcome to Mansfield. So she has to leave pretty soon. Like, she can't just be like somebody she talks about. She talks about her sister. She talks about Gran. So, you're like, Juliet can't be there anymore. So that was also important too. So just once I created Maggie and once I understood who she was and got to know her and understood what music she liked and didn't like, that was always very important, is what music they like. Then what I can do is go, okay, now how does this version of Margaret Dashwood fit into the story of Sense and Sensibility? I need the major plot points in Sense and Sensibility, which are Eleanor and Ed. And then the Steeles, Lucy Steele shows up. Mm-hmm. And Lucy Steele in the book is a dummy. And the original book is quite a dum-dum. And I wanted that to be, I almost wanted you to feel bad for her. Like, she's not a villain for being a dum-dum. She's just sweet and aw.
There's enough villains in your book.
Right, correct. And the fact that her dad and her sister are both these, like, her dad's a math professor and her sister's like a physics genius. So it makes it even more profound that she's such a, she's like so out of
it. In a way.
Dense. Yeah. So once she shows up, so that was really important to me. Like, you got to have that. Now you got to get the Steeles in there. And in the first book, Dr. Steele exists. He's the math professor. So it's like, oh, there's another easy connection to Mansfield right there. And then that was it. So once I got the plot points, Colonel Brandon has to be there. Willoughby has to be there. The older, and by the way, and in the original Sense Sensibility, the old, who is Sissy in my book, guess what her name is? Fanny.
Oh, okay. Oh, God. Yep.
Fanny Dashwood. And I almost called her Frances at first, but I was like, but everybody knows that Junior is Francis. So I didn't want to do that. And that's the problem, is all these names keep getting used over and over. So I got to come up with like clever ways to reuse the names.
To like tweak them to have like a nickname.
Because there's an Eleanor. Yeah, there's an Eleanor who's a major character in Northanger Abbey.
Oh, okay. Right.
So cool. Spelled differently, but doesn't matter. So I've already come up with a clever way to change that name. So Sissy is a nickname for Frances. That is something that people use. So anyway, so as long as I knew I had the major plot points, they get kicked out of their. The dad dies, they get kicked out of their things. Mary Ann's a drama queen. Eleanor falls in love with her sort of brother-in-law. Well, it is her brother-in-law. So like, go. And then it was like, what does this heartbroken character do when she's forgotten about constantly? What would it be like to watch your sibling's life? So, and then the line, that other Dashwood girl, is actually, she says it in the first book. She actually says it to Junior. She's like, people always say, oh, there's that other Dashwood girl. And since I said that, I was like, oh, I got to make sure that happens. And, she needed somebody to talk to, and that's where Gran comes from. In the original book, Gran is the gossip. But I thought, but who are the people that we don't pay attention to? Kids and old people.
And you put that in the book as well, you say that.
I do. Yeah. And so, but they have lives. Kids, when you're 12, I mean, I'm sure when Megan comes home from work every day, those kids, whatever, like, she's like, whatever your drama is, you're 12. But like, that's all they know. Their feelings are like so tunnel big. Vision. Yeah.
There's no stress of like work and trying to feed your family and like complicated money stuff and mortgages and chores. It's literally just social stuff and the things you like. And that's why so many young people get hyper focused and obsessed with stuff. It's like,
correct.
One Direction is my life. BTS is my life. Star Wars is my life, because literally 50% of your life is like the thing you like. 40% is social stuff and like 10% is family. And that's it. So that's how it happens. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's a certain thing that happens, and it's worse for women than it is for men. But there's a certain point in time when a woman becomes a certain age that she becomes furniture. And you see, and unfortunately, and you see this, that happened to Jane herself because she didn't get married, right? So she obviously could comment on this. And in the original Sense Sensibility, Colonel Brandon is 35 years old and Mrs. Dashwood is 40 years old. But the whole thing is like, Colonel Brandon should totally hook up with Mary Ann. She's 16. And you're like, but what if not? because Colonel Brandon and Mrs. Dashwood probably would get along great. And you see in the book, the original book, they get along great. So, of course, I didn't want my version of Brandon to be the same age as the mom. I didn't want it. Again, that's an issue in the originals. But I also gave her a name, which she doesn't have in the original book. But so I wanted the women in the book, and Jane always comments on the fact that the women, so you've got little girls who disappear. You've got Marianne is the way she is because she just is desperate for attention because people aren't paying attention to women. And the most important day for women during Jane Austen's time is their wedding day. And then after that, they don't matter. They are now furniture. So imagine you're a widow and your two children are only girls. What would happen to you? But it's still true now. Like when actors get to be a certain age, they are no longer allowed to play the sexy, femme fatale
sexy
anymore.
lead, unless the film is about them being a retired old woman, unless it's being the Maggie Smith of ironically the name, unless you're being the fancy Maggie Smith of Downton Abbey, you can't be that, or the Dame Judi Dench. You can't be the main character unless it's a period piece about an old woman.
Correct. Or it's like the Diane Keaton has like started like a cottage industry of like old ladies getting randy, which I love. And I watch all those movies because I love Diane Keaton, but and not all those movies are good, but I appreciate that she's like, no, we're just going to keep making these movies because just because we're in our 60s doesn't mean we don't exist. Mm-hmm. But she's Diane Keaton. So she can, but for a long time she was relegated. She's like, I am Diane Keaton. How dare you? How dare you do that to me? So she's taking that, her own production company, and she's doing it. But there's that thing where you get to be a certain age and now you're just a mom or you're a grand. Gran doesn't have a name other than Gran, which I find that's important to me. She doesn't have a name in the original book either. But she also wants that. But being a gran is really important to her. She wants other people to be seen. So I just thought that was fun to say, like, these people on the margins of other people's lives are children and the old people. And you forget to say, how are you? You forget to ask them questions. Me. Yeah.
The amount of birthdays that people forget.
Tough.
One of my biggest... it's never happened to me, so it's not some weird trauma that I'm coming out with. Yeah. Like, one of the things that makes
I forgot your birthday this year.
Oh, no, I don't give... now,
2 days late, I sent you a text. I felt really bad.
If ever, I genuinely... As long as my mum says happy birthday...
That's all that matters. Right,
they're the only two people I overtly expect it. Anyone else, if it's the day after, week after, month after, I don't give a shit. Yeah. But the one thing that upsets me more than so many things in this world is when you've got a young kid who either has a birthday party and no one attends. That makes me want to cry talking about it. That's one of the most horrible things that can happen to a child that's not extreme trauma. I'm talking like low-key manageable trauma. Or people then being like excited by stuff, including their birthday, and people just not ask, like saying happy birthday or making a deal about the stuff they like. I see that quite a lot. And I'm like, when I eventually have kids, I'm like, whatever they're super passionate about, I will be passionate about it too, because there's nothing worse than being like, especially a preteen, being like 13, 14 years old and being like, I love this band, and everyone going, I don't care all their shit. Or being like, I love this TV show. No one watches it. You can't talk to anyone about it. And it's like, that crushes me. So I'm like, I want to, if I have a kid and stuff, I want to help that. So, and you tackle that in your book. It's literally like, Maggie really likes this stuff. And because of the father passing away, and it's very clever because you almost, certain characters, you kind of forgive them a little bit because you're like, okay, well, it's the anniversary of the dad dying. So you can kind of understand why people forget to wish her a happy birthday, but it doesn't make it any less sad for her. Right. And you even as the narrator, you go, and dear reader, this is not the last time someone forgets her birthday. And I'm like, no, Tony, what are you doing? Please.
Oh, yeah. Well, the narrator always wants you to be prepared for the stuff that's coming. And the narrator has opinions about it.
Well, I want to ask you, because I think we touched upon it in our, people listening. Tony and I have spoken about Welcome to Mansfield twice, I think.
Because Ada, once with Ada.
Once with you and once with Ada, because obviously audiobooky stuff, because obviously Ada's the narrator. But I want to ask you with the narrator element. So I've got a question. You kind of answered it a bit earlier, but how do you go about when you are the narrator and you're writing in the book book and you're like subtly giving hints to the future, and you're also making subtle jokes but not taking away from like the weight of certain situations. How do you balance that while still being faithful to Jane Austen while not taking away from your characters? Like, how do you balance that? And like, not only in these books but going forward, is there something that you've like really consciously had to think about and rewrite? Like, how do you balance that?
Well, that is an excellent question. So it is, sometimes it's hard when I'm doing other writing to get back to the narrator. So sometimes I have to like maybe write 3 or 4 chapters, and then I have to go back and make sure the narrator's there, and that it's, so the narrator is its own character. That is because you have a like when you write fiction is generally written first person. So like Holden Caulfield tells the story. If you really want to hear about it, you'll probably want to hear about where I was born and all that David Copperfield type crap. That's first person. Then there's third person, where it's like, in a hole in the ground lived a hobbit, right? That's how the Hobbit starts. And you're just like, oh, okay. And we're just going to hear about it. And it's going to be, the narrator isn't there. It's omniscient, just like reporting the facts, no commentary. Those are the 2 ways you're taught to write. And then there you can be like third person close, where you only follow one person. Then there's third person remote, where you can like jump to different people. But Jane Austen said, fuck that. I'm not going to do that. I got to do whatever I want. And because so you learn the rules and then you can break them. And so when I started writing it, the first one, the narrator just sort of happened in like me trying to pay a love letter to Jane and because Jane Austen has opinions. So it's like, well, what if the narrator has opinions? And what if the narrator wants you to be in on it? Like the narrator's there. And then Kat Valente, the fantasy writer Kat Valente, who Ada and I got to interview actually a few years back, in her September books, which are glorious. At the very end of those books, I'm like sobbing as they're ending. And Kat Valente, as the narrator, says, "Don't be sad." Like, how does she know? How does she know? Because she's sad. Like, she's finishing the books. Like the third to last page of the September books, the narrator busts in and says, "Don't be sad." And I was like, oh, you get to do that. So I've seen other people that I admire and respect do it. And so I was like, that is important. So once I understood that the narrator could just be a character, I just let them be. And now they get to have opinions. And it was honestly, Norris made it really easy for the narrator to have opinions, because like Norris and Tommy, and I know you love Tommy in the first book, they both want to be the star.
Yeah.
But the narrator's like, listen, in another book, they might be the star. This might be about them, but they're not.
Fingers crossed, more Tommy and Yates. That's it.
They are definitely.
Yeah, I know. I know. I already know. I was saying that because I know stuff that the audience don't know, because we're friends and I get to find out pieces.
Yeah, you do. Yes, Tommy and Yates are super fun, and they're actually going to be very integral to book 5. So, I love them. They're great. They're great fun, and I'm so pleased with them. But so the narrator was like trying to tamp that down, and I thought, well, it's fun. I want you to have fun with these books, and because Jane is having fun, and so once I realized the narrator could just do whatever, and the narrator could talk right to you, and other books do say, "Dear reader," it's not a thing that I didn't invent that, but I was like, well, let's just lean into that. So when I'm writing, so currently as I'm working on book 5, anytime that I know I'm going to really upset the main character, which probably is going to upset the audience, I prepare them a little bit. I'm like, okay, everybody hold on. And some of that is for me because I love these people or dislike them very much. And so I want to comment on them. I do wish we could all do that. Like I wish, and this is part of my love of musicals, that, the thing that I love about musicals is you're standing around, life is hard, you burst into song, you have backup dancers, you feel better. The audience knows, but the people in the scene don't know. Like a musical number doesn't affect the other people in the scene unless they're singing to each other, right? So when they're just singing when there's a solo, it's like in a play, it's the soliloquy, right? The solo song is a soliloquy. So I want the narrator to be there, to be that person, to break the fourth wall, which happens in other forms of art.
Well, comics. I was thinking that you're a big comic fan, and comics literally, famously, Spider-Man, for I think still now, had thought bubbles. So you're like, You just could see Peter Parker swinging through the city, but you know what he's thinking.
Correct.
Or you get certain, I think certain Batman stuff is like the little yellow box narrator stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, comics do it a lot as well. Two of your big passions,
That's
comics
true.
and musicals.
That's true. And Stan Lee also commented a lot. Chris Claremont did. They're always like, here's this, here's this. And
Chris Claremont did it to
a little
the nth
too
degree.
much. Yeah, a little too much maybe, Chris. Tone that down. But so the narrator is just, once I realized the narrator could be a character, that could be the glue, and you're going to do a shared universe. So now this narrator gets to know the future and the past and everything. The narrator's also trying to remind you that this is a standalone story, but remind you that these other characters exist in other worlds. And like, also we as people, you and I as people who only know each other through a weird confluence of events, but now we're very good friends. That's weird. But there's another world where we don't know each other, right? But that's a sad, different world. And so the narrator is there to remind you that the world is spinning and that you are in this world too. And I think by having that narrator be there, you could almost imagine the narrator narrating your life too. And so while clearly my version of the Austen Chronicles is fictional, COVID is never mentioned. But the music is real. The art is real. Some of the places are fictional, but I always make sure I mention some real places. Like there's always like a real town named or a real thing named, real music, real movie. So I want you to feel part of it. And I think by having the narrator sort of whisper in your ear, you get to feel like, oh, I could bump into these people. Like it makes it seem less fictional. Whereas when it's like the hole in the ground, the reason that Tolkien wrote that way is he wants you to believe that Middle Earth is real, right? And he wrote that way, like very like he's writing the history of Middle Earth, and he's got maps and all this stuff.
Especially the Silmarillion, isn't it? It's like you read
right, yeah, exactly. And so, but he wrote it in a different way, like a history book, and that's why people are like, I want to watch those movies, not read those books, because I don't want to watch history. But I want you to feel real. But feel like I'm at a story telling you, like Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner style, let me tell you all about Maggie Dashwood. So Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner does that, if you've ever read that.
You can assume I've not read any classic literature.
Okay. In Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner is like there's a guest at a story telling the story. Right. And the Wuthering Heights is that way too. Like the person telling the story in Wuthering Heights are not Heathcliff and Catherine. It's like a lady who works at the hotel where the guy is staying.
Right.
So you have to like go, is the narrator reliable? So is my narrator reliable? I hope so, because he's giving you his opinions. I think when you're so one-sided, you're like, well, are you being too editorial? Like, are you cutting things out? Like, I'm giving you the warts and all, the ugly.
Well, there are parts in which I think the narrator works really well, because there's points, especially in the Other Dashwood Girl, where a lot of the summer holidays, they get, the summer holidays, they're sort of the main parts.
Yeah.
And the school year is like, right, here's a montage, listen to this song, and then imagine, Maggie Dashwood sat here wearing a different tie every day, everyone rushing around her in that way. And like, this is a good school year. This is a bad school year. Like you say, like, this is a chapter about the main beats of her story from the school year that are going to be relevant to her character, but let's not have 4 chapters, or let's not have a chapter that goes 9 months later in the summer, in the June morning. You just go, right, here's just a quick summary. And I know, it's a montage, but listen to this song while you're doing it. And it's like, it brings, I think what your narrator does very cleverly in your novels is that it adds some humor. It does brace us for emotional things. It makes you feel like you're okay feeling these things. It makes you know that when you hate a certain character or love a certain character, it's like, no, we get that. That's good. You should be feeling that way. Like, reinforces you. But also, there's certain points in the book which could be slower. And I think you did it better in the Other Dashwood Girl. I don't think Welcome to Mansfield has got necessarily slow parts I can remember. But I remember that Other Dashwood Girl having no parts at all that I could even vaguely think of memory reading that was slow for me, because any of the parts that I think could have been slow, you insert the narrator in the right way to basically go, right, this bit's going to be slow, so let's speed through it, and here's some like extra information throughout. And it's kind of the mixing of right, not much is happening plot wise, but we have to get through it, so let's add a bit more in here that doesn't take away from stuff. And that's what the balancing act is that I really liked.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I think the narrators for the book I'm working on right now.
As you said, it's glue.
It is glue. Chapter 2, because Jane does this in everything, or Abby too. When you meet Kat, 10 years in one chapter.
Wow.
You get her from 5 to 15, and you got like, let's move along. And so Jane did it. So I was like, well, what is Jane doing here? Hitting the big beats. And what are the big things you remember? The awful things.
Yep.
So it's like, so I got to like set you up in chapter 2 to be like on Kat's side right away. And so that's the big thing, is the narrator has already witnessed it, knows that it's bad, is emotionally braced for it. And then that's where some of the jokes come in, because sometimes the best way to take bad news is with a little bit of humor, a little bit of soften the blow with the joke. She's okay. Don't worry. Sucks. This day sucks, but she'll get better. So then you are prepared. So because the narrator, like I feel the narrator felt all those feelings when the narrator first saw it, and now that the narrator's reporting it to you, they're trying to prepare you emotionally.
The narrators almost could be considered. I mean, I'm not a religious individual, but like I could almost see the narrator's almost like the god you'd want to exist.
Sure.
It's almost like you've died and you're in whatever the afterlife is, and you're like, I want to know about this person's life, and God goes, cool. Here it is. Here's you getting to witness this person's life. I'm not going to show you every single bit. Yeah, it's most bits, but it's also like the God character, the narrator, is literally like, here's a bit where two characters are kissing. Let's move on. You don't need to know the specific details and intricacies of two teenagers kissing, and that's quite like is like, let's let them have privacy, and you kind of do that at points in the book, and I won't spoil those bits, but you go, this happens. You know what happens next. They're teenagers. They're by themselves in a house. Let's skip forward a couple of hours to after, you don't. So I like that. That's how I rationalize your narrator character. I go, this is Tony if he was God, which would be awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate
I love that. I know our time is, we're nearing the end. So I do want to hit a couple of things I liked.
Sure.
One thing is, and we've touched upon this, so I don't necessarily need you to comment. I need you to listen, Tony.
I'm going to listen. I will mute and drink some coffee.
Is the ashes scene and the experience with grief, which I really, really liked. It really touched me, as you've touched upon this conversation. Like, there's a bit which was, I've actually written, a grief had deafened and silenced them all, I think is what you said. And I was like, God, that is a lot, and again, as someone who's lost their dad when I was 19, I really connected to that stuff. So I liked that. There's another bit which you wrote, so that happened, and Juliet, which was a part of it that I really liked. I've got lots of scrambling notes here. I've got nothing gets past Gran, which I really liked, again, that happened. That bit absolutely cracked me up. But there's another bit which is the sake of knowledge versus the sake of information, which is really interesting. So you could almost do a whole podcast on that. I also wrote Maggie's lack of self-understanding, which I quite like, and action movies' unashamed comfort. I really like that element as well. Again, I've got a whole page of notes here of just stuff I want to say I like and trying to convince people to pick up these books because they're phenomenal. But like, there was a bit specifically, I've got Marianne is kind of like Maria Bertram, self-centered and overdramatic, and I hate them. I also, one of my notes here literally written down is, are all secondary Austen characters named similarly, which we've already tackled again.
They are.
And then there's a quote from you, which is, compassion is free, and so is the return, and so the return on investment is infinite. I love that line. That is like something that should be on a poster, compassion is free, and so the return on investment is infinite. I love that. Then there's also, was not caring the same as accepting, which is really powerful. That's obviously linking with the coming out story, which I think was incredible. And we've already touched upon, does Austen give hints to the future, which you kind of touched upon anyway. But then there's one other bit that I think I want to say, which then I do want to hear from you, because I just want to reel these things off how much I enjoy it, which is being laughed at for not knowing something as a child. And I've written, is childhood trauma a part of all the Austen Farina books, or is it really, is childhood trauma really just a part of everything? And I think it is. I think I've answered my own question there, but I started writing that. I was like, God, childhood trauma is quite a common theme in these books. And I was like, wait a minute. And I thought about my own life and everything I've ever read. And I was like, oh no, childhood trauma is a part of everything. Like, my love of Star Wars, the reason it's so deep in me is because it connects me to a simpler time with my dad, and he's not around anymore. And that he wasn't around when the sequel trilogy was announced. So now there's a connection there where my connection to the new era of Star Wars is inextricably linked to what I lost with my dad. So it's like this thing that I hadn't really realized until years after Dad passed away. And I'm like, oh yeah, why do I like this thing and hate that thing? Childhood trauma. So I just want to throw the baton back to you, sir, of childhood trauma. Nice, happy thing to talk about. And then we'll wrap up because we've only got a few minutes.
Childhood trauma. Yes, all of that is true. That actually happened to me. The map thing, that actually happened to me. I asked that question and was mocked.
So why don't you just quickly elaborate for people
on
the specific bit?
I was very little, and I looked at a map, and north is up, and I didn't understand it. I'm like 5, and I didn't understand how, like, if because I live in Michigan, and we went to Ohio, and I'm looking at the map, and I was like, not understanding how Michigan's above us. Like, how is it the same sky? Because nobody explained the globe. You're looking at a map. I was 5. I mean, I could read books, but nobody like explained simple things to me. So I asked that question, which I thought was totally legitimate. And the answer should have been, great question. The earth is round. Yeah. Not flat.
Get a bit of paper, fold it round, and go, look, this is how you show a child, it's how you conceptualize it.
Correct. But instead, there was like I didn't get an answer. It was just like, laugh at me.
And that's still with you now.
Still.
Decades later. Cool memory.
So over a score later, because I am over 50 years old. Yes. So, yes. Yeah. And it was awful because it was like, I thought it was a legitimate question. And so I feel like there's a way to like say to kids, like, oh, that's funny that you think that. Let me explain it to you. As opposed to like, there's a way to laugh with a child and laugh at a child. And I don't think you should laugh at a child unless they're being funny. Then you're still laughing with them. But like, so yeah. So I think we all, the new book mentions, parents do their best. They fuck us up. It's what they do. And some scars, and I'm a sensitive kid. Like as a kid, I was told I was overly sensitive, and it wasn't until like the last 5 years that I was like, no, I'm just sensitive. It doesn't mean there is no such thing as overly sensitive. I literally read a whole book on it because I had to read a book by somebody else saying you are not alone by feeling the way that you're feeling. But yeah, so I think, and as you said earlier, the trauma is different. There's levels of trauma. Being made fun of is not the same as being abused, being beaten or anything. But there are things that just hurt you. And if you don't ever apologize, and I know that I have apologized to my kids for, when you're being an asshole as a parent, you do your best to apologize, whether they hear the apology or not. I absolutely have made them because, you're not perfect. You're just a person. And I think a sincere apology goes a long way. It's all Maggie's looking for. Is for anybody to apologize. And there's the moment when she's in the shower and they realize they forgot her birthday and Eleanor comes in, and that's Eleanor's apology, is to burst in on her while she's naked in the shower. She's like, I do love Eleanor. I love Eleanor too.
I love her so much. I'm like, one of the questions, which we'll get on to at another point, but one of the questions I had was like, I worry that I sometimes am or potentially could be a Marianne.
Oh no.
But then I go, no, because I've literally written down here, I wrote minor existential crisis. I know Tony's going to say no because of being a friend and things, but the idea of friends not actually knowing me, they only know a part of me, and what if actually I can hide versions of myself and I'm actually a Marianne, but that in itself shows that I'm not a Marianne, because Marianne would never do that. She's not aware enough to hide a part of herself to be nice to someone, and hiding a part of yourself that's mean to be nice to someone in a lot of ways is actually a nice act. So it's so I had a minor existential crisis. Oh, no. Well, in a good way, reading your book, being like, God, what if I was a Marianne? But then realizing, as what I've said to people in the past, and I'll say it when I eventually have kids and stuff, which is like, if you ever have the concern, am I a good person? You are probably already a good person because good people ask that of themselves. Bad people never question what they're doing. They never think, am I a bad person? Am I hurting someone's feelings? If you're a good person, you would consider other people's feelings. So that the question in itself at least partly does answer your question. So
yes,
and that's how brilliant your characters are. Like the three Dashwood girls genuinely making me think I could have done a whole, I want to let you talk about the books and stuff. I didn't want to dive in and alienate most of the audience who have not yet read these books. But I just want to say, like, the characters are so brilliant. I was like, am I more like an Eleanor? Am I more like a Maggie? I think I'm probably more of an Eleanor, but I think I want to be more of a Maggie, but I'm quite extroverted, which is really neither of them. So that was the Marianne worry of me. I was like, so I love it. Maybe a Gran. Gran is the best.
Gran's
she
the best.
is just the god character.
Yeah, there's a lot of throughout the books of older people saying, "How old do you think I am?" That shows up again in
the narrator part of Gran. Like, literally, thank you very much. The amount of times you wrote that, absolutely. I just think of like the thank you, like that bit. I love the sass, sass of the narrator. Well, time is up, but let's pass the baton back to you. Final things. Obviously, we've got fireside chats on YouTube and Instagram that you're doing. There's AR Farina on social media and all that kind of jazz. There's your website, arfarina.com. There's your books, the Austen Chronicles. There's the essay collection, Comics Lit. But final statement from you before we end this.
Well, first of all, thank you for this, my friend. Thank you for giving me the place to do this. I just hope, my goal is that someone will pick this up. And this happened to one person who said in a review that she stopped reading Welcome to Mansfield midway through and went and read Mansfield Park because she'd never been able to get through it. And reading my book allowed her to get through it. So please reach out to me if you like it, if you hate it, whatever. The inspiration that these books bring to you. And my hope is that, and this is what I hope too, like, do this. If you've ever thought, what if? I mean, that's what Clueless is, right? Clueless is Emma. So if you've ever thought, what if this? Do it. Like, Jane would love it. Jane, I believe, would love all of the Austen stuff that's out there. I think she would have loved Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. I think she genuinely would have like stood up and applauded at that. I've been like, bravo. So I hope that I inspire you to tell stories. I think every time we make art, we put a piece of ourselves in the world, but hopefully inspire other people to do so as well. So, and obviously listen along, read along, send me messages. You can, if you email me through the website, a reply is guaranteed. I thank you, my friend, for this. Just read more books, think more thoughts, and let art in, because art is what really ultimately is love. Like, there's food, clothing, shelter, love, right, is the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but art is love. When you think about, like, art is you. So I love this stuff. I hope people are moved by my stories. I hope, I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm hopeful to share some good in the world.
What a perfect way to end. Thank you so much, good sir.